welcome to another episode of Trident Talks. I'm Gareth Davies. I specialize in helping early and growth stage vendors build their go-to-market team. And today I'm joined by Sam Saluja, CEO at Guardrail AI. Sam, let's start with your story. Can you share a bit about your background, how and when you got interested into Web3, and just a general introduction?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Gareth. Super excited to see the work that Trident's doing to build security teams for up and coming startups. We're happy to be working with you. And quick introduction for myself. As you mentioned, I'm the founder at Guardrail, and I've been building, cybersecurity tooling for the blockchain space for just about 2.5 years now. I got into the crypto space through security. That's been my core kind of entry point. I've been doing security since I was 11 years old. It goes back to when I was growing up, I saw my dad was in the Air Force. So I watched him use his talents to kind of serve the nation. I felt that the minute I learned to code, I wanted to kind of use that as a way to give back and had a moral imperative to kind of use those tools to do some good in the world. So security was something that kind of really filled me with a lot of pride and joy since I was really young. It helped that, a couple of years later, my dad was a chief security officer, and my mom also ended up doing a PhD in information security.
Okay.
Dinner table, we're talking about security standards, we're talking about meltdown inspector attacks, operational security, and I'm, 14 years old, just watching these conversations at dinner table. So, it felt very interesting, felt very high stakes. It felt like our own version of James Bond, but, within the family in cybersecurity is how it all started. And then, one thing led to another. I did some work in back-end cybersecurity at Symantec, did some bug bounty hacking on platforms like HackerOne. Um, did my fair share of incident response most recently when I was at LinkedIn. And I was kind of following the puck, like seeing where the biggest challenges were. And for me, I think security has such a big surface area. So I was always kind of curious to see the things that people aren't talking about yet, but are going to be mainstream trends in 12 months. And when I was keeping an eye on that, I noticed that a lot of the bigger attacker groups are making their way onto the blockchain kind of products because as of 2022, it felt like there was very little regulation there. These products were run by 5 to 6 person teams that were controlling millions of dollars in some kind of, not the most mature key management practice. So, a small team, you've got a legal gray area, and you've got overnight success. So, if you're an attacker, do you go after, a T-Mobile or a healthcare system, or do you go after something that's giving you immutable, instant access to liquidity? So, I watched a lot of the attacker groups in the dark web kind of move their chatter from Web 2 to Web 3. That's kind of what piqued my interest, and yeah, the more I dug in, the more it excited me.
Okay, cool. And at a high level now, before can we get into it, because I've got just a couple more questions. What are you guys doing or what are you doing now at Guardrail?
Yeah, with Guardrail, we're essentially trying to work on products that can make the blockchain a lot safer. Of course, that's a blanket statement because based on what the product is, it could serve more of a something like a Cloudflare, where it's giving you some, front end support so that your application isn't taken down.
Yeah.
For many people, it's actually more integrity guarantee to know that the products that you're running on the blockchain are performing as expected. There's no supply chain risk. For other people, it's actually kind of fraud prevention and phishing prevention for users. What's really interesting is all of this on the blockchain is kind of denoted in a similar manner, given that the blockchain is a standardized system. So we've kind of built really easy to use components that you can simply toggle on and off, and we built a really powerful infrastructure to enable the Robin Hoods and Fidelities of the world, but also the you and me launching our own NFT. Like all of it can share the same security platform, and that's kind of what Guardrail is meant to be.
Okay then. So on the back of that, so what did working in traditional security world teach you that the Web3 space might be missing or might be ignoring at the minute?
That is a great question. So, like, what lessons did working in Web 2 security bring to Web 3?
Yeah. Just go with that.
Yeah, I would say there's so many parts that Web 3 is built on Web 2. It's very clear. First of all, um, in Web 2, you can't think of launching any kind of product or feature without some metrics or measurement, There's no way that you could, and I learned this watching this happen at LinkedIn, but also the companies that I worked before. It doesn't matter what you're launching, some kind of instrumentation to know, who's doing what on your application is considered basic in Web 2 these days. In Web 3, that's still something people are kind of getting the handle of. But it really helps us to know that like the users that are building on crypto have that maturity in the Web 2 context so that we can kind of work with them and give them at least the basics of what they would expect in Web 2. So the GCP, AWS style of managed software is something we're trying to bring over to Web 3 too. Um, for me personally, having been in so many incidents, I've kind of learned firsthand the importance of really accurate communication, um, escalating policies when it comes to cybersecurity, the use of friction in terms of making it harder for the attackers, making it economically disincentivizing the attackers. This is all stuff that we've done in Web 2. And so bringing all that over to Web 3, the platform that we're building now is kind of bringing in all those basics, right?
Okay.
Although it's a 5, 6 person team building this as a startup. We're building this with all the learnings that we learned by studying GitHub, studying Azure Sentinel, studying Google's technology, and kind of making our own adaptations of that. So yeah, we're in essence we're building the most 2025 version of security tooling, kind of learning from the last decade.
Okay, cool. And when it comes to, I know you said that you were, you're kind of following the money when you made this decision to launch Guardrail, and you're trying to foresee into the future, right? But was there a specific pain point or an incident that pushed you to go like, that's it, this is what I need to do?
Yeah, totally. I would say quite a few different things, but I actually had two people very close to me go through hacks, and they reached out to me. One was actually my own brother. He um, he very famously had, there was a pretty big hack called Mount Gox, and within our family, he was the first one to dip his toes in crypto. Um, like all of us, he was that friend who started mining Bitcoin in 2012, 2013, had a lot of it up until 2015, 2016. And then when Mt. Gox happened, which was a pretty large hack at the time, which caused the blockchain to fork, he was kind of one of the people that lost a lot of Bitcoin on the Mt. Gox exchange. And that felt like a very pivotal moment for him in terms of, fully turning him off of crypto. But
Yeah,
what I noticed is that, crypto ends up going in these cycles, right? We've got 3, 4 year cycles, bull and bear. And what I noticed is every cycle has its own versions of this Mount Gox. Back back in the 2016 era, it was them. But then you look at the era after that, there was one or two flagship hacks that each user can name that they've gone through. And then I kept thinking the cycle won't repeat itself. But then this year we had Bybit.
yeah,
We've had some pretty large hacks so far. And every cycle seems to have their own hacks that define it, which shows me that the problem doesn't seem to be going away. What's worse is that the headline number of that next generation's hack is always worse, right?
yes,
So clearly, even though liquidity is growing, risk management isn't kind of trending in the same direction. Um, I think in terms of the question you had earlier about what we can learn from Web 2, we actually had a snippet on our website that talked about why Web 3 is different from Web 2, actually. And the way to think about it is in crypto, the four things that define what crypto is, it's inherently open source. So any code that you're deploying, attackers can read it, which means the dwell time of reverse engineering your code is very low compared to Web 2. It's open state, which means the attacker can actually wait for the right moment to attack. There isn't necessarily the Web 2 element where you can do an upgrade. On the Web 3 side, attackers can choose the point that you're distracted or you're launching something new to kind of go after the product. It's open entry, which just means there's not always a KYC, there's not always a sign up. Anybody can show up and like use your product. And then it's open exit, which just means once the funds leave your protocol, there's full immutability, right? You can't necessarily go back and undo. You can't rotate passwords. You can't even send an email because very often there's no email. So open source, open state, open entry, and open exit makes, and this quote came from somebody else was, I think it was the founder of Polygon who said that DeFi is the harshest environment to deploy code into. So in any case, I think that kind of shows you why if Web 2 is still learning and evolving the security practices, Web 3 is kind of doing it on hard mode and the tools just weren't there. That's kind of why we started at Guardrail.
cool. Okay, yeah. And for the folks who might be listening that is interested in Web3 or maybe super keen to get into the space, can you break down how Guardrail works in simpler terms?
Yeah, certainly. So with Guardrail, what we've built is a what we call like an always-on opt-in security layer for the blockchain. And really, how it works is the blockchain you can think of as a way to offload servers with being able to have a always-on ledger that's updating with some kind of record keeping. While all that data is fully public and anybody can use it, you need a system that can make sense out of that data to be able to use that data that's public. So what Guardrail is it's almost a translation layer that has been built to make sense out of more than 25 to 30 different blockchains today. Each blockchain has a different way of bringing money in. Each blockchain has a different ecosystem of addresses, different ecosystem of assets. And what Guardrail has done is we've created a kind of mapping and data ingestion system for those different blockchains and exposing them in very easy to use security modules for a customer. And what's really nice is we're taking away a lot of the heavy lifting that's involved with looking for a phishing detection or looking for some kind of insider threat. We've kind of brought the data in, made it into a very easy to use engine, and not just that, we've connected it to our own response toolkit. And that response toolkit is also really nice because um, when you get into response on the blockchain, each actor in the blockchain can be privileged. So how do you have a response toolkit that doesn't increase your risk area, actually does it in a risk minimizing manner? So we have a few immutable and ready to go response actions that we've built into our platform. A good example, just to kind of tie this whole thing together, is let's say you've launched a crypto product, you're allowing users to bring in, as many assets as you'd like. If one of those assets has a huge consolidation action somewhere else on the blockchain, which makes it now an unhealthy asset, unless you're watching the entire blockchain, you won't know that the asset that you're holding, maybe $5 million off is now suddenly worth $3 million. And without knowing that detection, you can watch your 5 million kind of fade away and you'd just be sleeping and you wouldn't even know. With Guardrail, you actually get real-time notifications the minute that token is starting to become unhealthy. And you can even set up a circuit breaker so that if that hits some kind of backstop, you can actually move it to a healthier asset
Okay.
and get that risk management kind of ready to go without any building.
So it's almost like a stop loss. Or you can include a stop loss into it to say that if it hits this level, then we kind of cash out and remove ourselves from the trade, so to speak, right?
Certainly, certainly. And that's just on the trading. Like, think about what this can do for a user activity or a market per se, because
Hmm.
certain markets you may not want to have exposure to a risky asset. So, if say you define a set of users that is sanctioned that you don't want to interact with, right now they could come in, use your product, and now suddenly you're subject of a legal kind of regulated
Sure.
risk that could come in. With Guardrail, the minute that user comes into a pool, you can actually exit and pause that pool so that you're not kind of creating a facilitating pool for some kind of illicit activity. So
Okay.
that's another quick example of not just trading, but regulation risk, economic risk, financial risk. We're able to kind of create these automated actions for all the different kinds of risks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think I understand. And what makes your approach fundamentally different from others in the space?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is something I would say we're iterating on all the time, right? The attackers move so quickly. Our team is very small, uh, but being very small, we can actually be really agile to move with our customers. So from that perspective, one of our biggest differentiators is we're a really, really cutting edge research team, and that's somebody you want to work with.
Yeah.
One thing we hear from customers all the time is accurate security needs really reliable and accurate data. And we have the most accurate data out there right now. This means lower false positives. This means, we're not accidentally moving funds that shouldn't be moved and having to undo that fund movement. This also means we're able to really customize our risk perimeter to whoever we're working with. And that's really nice too, because today, Web 2 is riddled with these point products. But as far as we can tell, like we're the most kind of comprehensive edge-to-edge security coverage for the blockchain teams. So I think in terms of edge-to-edge coverage, there's very few teams that have the kind of blueprint or module coverage that we do in terms of coverage. We also are really, really research oriented, which just means every single week we're improving the actual nuts and bolts of the monitoring, which ends up resulting in higher attacks detected and lower false positives. And we're also the only ones that are constantly doing AI innovation along the whole workflow.
Okay.
Again, we're a small team, so we use AI to make our whole team more effective. And we want to bring that also into the product. So if you're a Guardrail customer, you're having AI that's helping you analyze your data, that's helping you respond to alerts. It's also helping you set up the monitoring. We've kind of integrated AI across the whole flow, so that what should take you maybe a day of configuration, you can do in 15 minutes. And we're using some AI. Also, the only team that's doing that right now.
Nice. Okay, cool. I spoke to Chris in a previous conversation, and he spoke about like why traditional audits aren't enough, and that you guys are kind of doing that real-time monitoring type stuff. So um, it's clear that audits are necessary, right? But if perhaps it's not quite sufficient. Can you explain what's missing once a protocol actually goes live?
Absolutely. It's a really good question. We grapple with this quite a bit since audits have done so much great good for the space in
Mm.
getting developers educated on what the risks are. Auditors have created user trust in many ways. And just to get into kind of why audits are needed and some uniqueness about the crypto space is uh, the biggest risk for crypto is it's highly composable, right? Um, if I just simply launch a token today, somebody else could launch a pool on top of it. Another person could launch a stable coin on top of that. And somebody else somewhere else could launch an entire product on top of that. So that's five people I've never met that are using code that I've deployed. This doesn't happen in the Web 2 world, but it's really easy to happen in Web 3. So it's that composability that is really exciting for growth, right? Like somebody finds an opportunity, they bring in market making, and that's suddenly an overnight millions of dollars in that contract. So it's a double-edged sword of composability, and that goes into why even if you can really double check your own work with an audit, you never really know who else is going to integrate with you in what way. Um, I think adding on to that, the reason that audits can be hard is crypto itself moves very fast. So teams are often deploying in Solidity. Some teams use Viper. Those languages themselves update their frameworks pretty regularly. So something that's supported in Solidity X may not be supported in X.2 or X.3, and and you're relying on an auditor to kind of catch those things much after the product has been built, just before you're going to go live. So I would say the languages change so fast. It's a highly composable space. And there's a really famous incident responder. His name's Sam CC Sun. You may have seen him on Twitter. So a shout out to Sam CC Sun. Check him out. But he had a really good quote on this where, safe components combined unsafely is is a risk waiting to happen, something along those lines. So I think that's how I view audits, right? They're able to kind of guarantee some level of security for a specific piece of code, but it's more how that piece is used in real world that ends up being where the attackers are able to, really exploit some vulnerabilities. And that's why you need like a real-time system to be able to kind of stay ahead of these things.
Cool. And I suppose what does real-time defense look like in practice for a protocol or smart contract? Like how automated is that?
It's a really good question. How automated is real-time monitoring? So we've come up with several frameworks to give teams almost a level of progress bar when they're getting into setting up monitoring. Um, Couple of different frameworks. I'm thinking about which one's the most relevant here. Um, I would say a commonly used one is we have there's like a three completeness bar. One is monitoring, next one is detection, and the third one is response. We call monitoring just knowing that things are looking good, things are healthy, right? Even if a system's on, it's telling you every minute of every day of every week that your systems are not hacked. Just getting that green indicator regularly is something that gives a CTO or a market maker or a Fidelity a peace of mind that there isn't a hack happening. So we call that monitoring. Then you've got the detection to know if something were to go wrong, am I going to get an alert? And is that alert going to have enough context that I can resolve it quickly? So that's also something we've built a lot of automation around. But that detection needs to capture different kinds of risks. We're talking external risks, internal risks, and that's where that library of modules I was describing earlier is. And the third one is, for anything that can be pre-described, do we have a prevention system, a run book, and even an on-call SOC or somebody able to jump in
Sure.
and respond, right? So we have teams that just set up monitoring that don't really delve into detection, other ones that go into detection and don't get into response. And there's automation in our perspective across the whole thing. If done correctly, you should have 80% of the core risks kind of automatedly set up on monitoring, detection, and response. And the reason we do that is so that really as a team, you can focus on that 20, 10, or even 5% of attacks that do need your attention, that are more of the edge cases. And then over time, that number should go down.
Okay, and with the obviously with the Web3 space moving from like the traditional auditing into real-time monitoring, like is there like infrastructure or is the Web3 space ready for this kind of shift, or is there still like a cultural or maybe a technical blocker in place?
It's $1 million question.
Okay.
I would say, I would say, uh, crypto is now ready for that, for embracing that change to real-time monitoring.
Yeah.
Um, for context, I think it wasn't necessarily the case 2 years ago. 2 years ago, predominantly things were happening on a single chain. It was mostly Ethereum. And a single blockchain transaction would cost you $60, $80 just to move money from one wallet to another wallet. And all you could do with that was maybe buy a couple of NFTs,
Okay.
right? We've come a long way now that there's more than 20, 30 different chains that allow you to move funds for a fraction of a cent. There's so much you can do with that now. You could buy an up and coming producer's music. You could use
Yeah.
that to rent out a parking spot. Like the use cases have really, really blown up on chain. The speed and cost has dramatically improved across the last 2 years, and now I think we're seeing the huge adoption that's asking for security. It definitely felt a year or two ago that for security to really be meaningful, we have to have that adoption coming in. Um, I think for mainstream users, they may not still see some of that adoption, but we're in the ground, we're nose to the ground, we're watching the developers launch things that we can tell in the next 12 to 14 months is going to be what everyone's talking about.
Mhm.
So from our perspective, it's a matter of making sure security is ready for that big adoption that's coming up. But we are definitely seeing that excitement. We are seeing some really innovative products being shipped right now that are going to kind of change how we're doing things like Forex and payments and stable coins, things like that. So I think we're ready to embrace that change now. We may not have been earlier, but feels like the right moment.
I think that's probably the biggest, it's also the biggest draw and also the biggest concern or pushback, right, in a kind of just general society is the innovation around kind of the blockchain and the Web3 space and how fast it develops, right? And um, the issue I think that it's got is like people that don't follow it day in day out struggle to kind of keep up with the news, right? Because everything just develops and evolves so quickly. So where do you think like the blockchain security is headed over the next 2 to 3 years? Usually, I would ask this
Yeah,
question to a security practitioner and say, "Oh, give me 5 to 10 years prediction." But the blockchain space moves so quickly, I have to reduce it down to 2 to 3, right?
certainly, certainly. And just running with what you just said there, I do think one of the biggest challenges for blockchain right now is being able to educate and talk to a non-technical audience, right?
Yeah,
Blockchain itself is a term, it sounds very technical, it can be
yeah,
intimidating, right? Bitcoin maybe is more parsable to people. But I think, we just got to find a way to explain what the blockchain is doing, what it is to an everyday person, right? And we got to find a way to make it useful for them. A lot of
mm,
people only take the time to learn about something when it's really relevant to them. When I first moved to the US, I remember hearing about Robinhood and thinking, okay, like that's a zero commission is interesting.
yeah,
And then the minute I actually recognized the whole change they were able to do with going from a Charles Schwab and Fidelity kind of run ecosystem to now having, everybody, you and your friends now kind of sharing screenshots of Robinhood. Like this is a new version of social trading that Robinhood enabled. And I think we got to think about what is going to be that Robinhood moment or even that Chat GPT moment, right, for
yeah.
crypto, so that it can be something that everyone's talking about and it's able to really, change everyone's daily lives.
Yeah.
To answer your question about where security is going, um, to me, I would say it's a lot of what we're about to see is we're still very much the way it feels is in like a stress test mode, is what I would call it. There's currently, as of now, to the next 2 years, like there's very little regulation, there's very little legal support. There's a lot of technologies being proposed, formal verification,
Mhm.
fuzzing and real-time monitoring. There's some early adopters, but I would say we're not quite at the point where I can see some predictability in the security market for blockchain.
Okay.
And I think the thing that we're watching the whole space learn is every hack is over $1 million, and all the prevention technologies is less than 500,000.
Yeah.
So we're watching that divergence happen where hacks are getting bigger and cost of mitigation is getting smaller. And I think that's something I can commit on for sure is in the next 2 years, we're going to see hacks continue to get bigger and cost of mitigation continue to get a lot lesser. And us doing the job of educating teams that, you know, an ounce of prevention is better than cure down the road
Sure.
for sure.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. And for builders, I suppose launching protocols today, what's what's one piece of advice you'd give to make security part of their product DNA and not just a checkbox?
That's a really good question. One piece of advice. Thinking of 3 to 4 good ones, but let me narrow it down to one.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say the thing that comes to mind is um, make security simple. And if you're a protocol today, um, people are going to sell you some very complex, fear-based security, buy everything under the sun. Uh, but if you're a crypto protocol, you're very often a very understaffed and small team. I'm thinking about Aave, right? Aave is the number one crypto protocol right now in TVL, $34 billion, and the team is less than 100 people, right? 34 billion, and that's funds on chain. This is not even like a valuation or anything like that.
Sure.
And that's less than 100 people. So if I'm them and I want to be the next Aave, I think you make security really, really simple. Boil it down to 1 or 2 people that are responsible for it. You make very simple documented processes ready to go. And just recognize that the cost of not doing that is so high, right? Like you should, spending a couple of days, 2 weeks on security to offset 5, $6 million of hacks or worse. So just one thing is just keep it simple, do it early. It's probably my advice.
Amazing. Okay, cool. And finally, what roles have you got coming up on the horizon, and how can people watching this episode maybe follow what you're building, or learn more about Guardrail, or even check over a CV?
Yeah, Guardrail is definitely entering its growth mode. We've been really fortunate in the last 7 months. We've onboarded one client a week, and things are looking really, really interesting. We're now doubling that, so 1 or 2 clients a week now, which is really exciting. And we're seeing some of the enterprises, pick up Guardrail and use that internally. We're also fortunate to be backed by Coinbase, Han Ventures. So we have some amazing advisors, amazing investors, and we're just about to announce our up and coming fundraise, our recent clients case study. So it's a really exciting time to consider joining Guardrail if anyone's really interested in blockchain security. In terms of what we're hiring for, we're looking for growth on both go-to-market and engineering. I will say we're very much a research-heavy team. So if you're interested in blockchain security research, we're really happy to have a conversation and see where you can fit into blockchain security research. If you're interested in security research overall and kind of bringing in, let's say, where the whole industry is going, MDR, AI, bringing that over to Guardrail, I mean, that's a very interesting conversation. We'd be happy to connect. And then in terms of sales and go-to-market, we're a very lean team, so always looking to grow there.
Cool, amazing. Sam, I appreciate your insights and introduction to the Web3 space. I'll end the episode here, and all the best at Guardrail.